You know, when you watch the Masters, or for that matter, when I was watching last night the season finale of Stick, which is really good on Apple TV, by the way. And when you watch it and you see the legendary Jim Nantz doing golf, broadcasts, it's obviously you get the golf whisper, right? Good afternoon, friends. Jim Nantz here at Augusta. I feel like that's what I need to do, because when you are encompassed and surrounded by the kind of intellectual greatness that I am today, then you feel very self-conscious, because I got James Boyd sitting here, I got Casey Vallier sitting here, I got Matt Taylor sitting here, and these guys are all trying to work. They're professional. They have jobs to do. The Colts have just finished up their first practice of Colts Camp 2025 out here at Grand Park in Westfield. And then, everybody's sitting here and they're trying to break down what Shane Steichen had to say about the practice today, that Daniel Jones took the very first starting reps, but Anthony Richardson took plenty of them as well. Daniel Jones threw an interception. Both of those quarterbacks were taking snaps primarily from Bortolini, who was at the center position. And, there were a number of things that were taking place at Colts camp here today, and people are talking about it, and they're discussing the fact that they can't wait to go home and get in the air conditioning, enjoy a cold beverage. And then while they're focused on all of this and they're breaking it down and everybody's discussing what took place and what the prognostications are going to be for the year, then I come in and just start yelling. So I feel very self-conscious about that. And so if I'm whispering over the course of today, then I hope that people can understand and respect why. We are on, Eddie, am I correct in saying that I'm on the YouTube page, but also very backlit, so I just look like a dark blob? Is that correct? Like it's
No.
Grimace coming live from Westfield, is that right?
No, we can see your entire face, outline everything. Nice shades.
Well,
there
you know
you
what?
go.
Hold on. Let me scoot up and do this right
Okay.
here. Now this sound that you hear, I don't know if you can hear this or not, but it's kind of like one of those, that kind of a sound. That's the sound of our female YouTube listenership skyrocketing from 2 to 4, just because of the fact that I'm right here within the glow of the sunshine behind me. But it is good to be out here. Day number 1 of Colts Camp 2025. And as I had mentioned, I just kind of laid out actually everything. It's good to be out here. Day number 1 of Colts Camp 2025. It mentioned. But after the practice, Shane Steichen came over and was talking with the media, and essentially with everything it was, hey, we're just trying to get in rhythm. Everything's good. Everything's great. We saw some good things. Liked what we saw. Everything's good. Everything's great. Liked what we saw. Good rhythm. And I get it. I mean, that's what you say after day number 1. Daniel Jones came over also and was talking with the media, and one of the things that Daniel Jones was pointing out was the fact that, they had an offseason where he was getting to know everybody in terms of things that they did as a group offensively, a retreat they took to California, kind of got to know each other, get the feel for things. And we're not going to know anything after one practice. That is the simple reality, is that there's just nothing that you can know from one practice. For example, Daniel Jones throwing an interception. Okay, one of the things about camp that I've always said where you have to be cautious to overreact, and I'm not saying it's the case with this, but it cannot be overlooked, the possibility that you don't know exactly what they're working on. I mean, it could well be. I don't think this is the case. I'm 99% certain it's not the case, but you can't rule this out. And that is the possibility, for example, of, them saying, hey, you know what, we want to get a really good look at Justin Wally, for example, who got most of the starting reps at corner today, the rookie. And Chris Ballard spoke highly of him yesterday. Perhaps that's somebody that you want to keep an eye on that can immediately come in. I think they really like his range and athleticism. But we've seen that before from young corners. Juju Brents was one of those that right away when he came in got opportunity from the get-go. But you never know if it's not a situation where all of a sudden they say, you know what, we want to really see how much we can test Wally. I'm just using that name as an example here. So let's call something where we throw a particular route to see if he can jump that and give him a glimpse of it. And so you're favoring or tipping it a little bit to see what his reaction is going to be. So it's favorable for a pick. I don't think that's the case. But in camp, you can never rule those things out. That's why statistically I think you have to take some things with a grain of salt. And accuracy actually is simply what you are looking for when it comes to quarterbacks. Are they overthrowing? Are they hitting their marks? Who are they looking towards with the most frequency? Because every quarterback, I think, has, it's no different, to be honest with you. My number one fear in life is public speaking. getting up in front of a large crowd, emceeing an event, giving a speech, those kinds of things, it terrifies me. Right now is a little bit out of the comfort zone because it's different than talking in a studio where you're just in a room and the only person I'm talking to is Eddie, which means I'm seeing the head of 3 people instead of 1, but still, nonetheless, it's not necessarily like a full live studio audience. And when you do that kind of a public speaking, at least for me, one of the things I think that you're taught is that you find someone in the crowd that makes you comfortable. So before I'll go to an event and do like a large public speaking engagement, there will be somebody that I talk to during the little, the little hors d'oeuvre thing beforehand and kind of chat up and become familiar or comfortable with, or I'll see someone that I know that's in the crowd, and then I try to spot them when I'm speaking and just look to them, and that's the comfort zone. That's the security blanket. And I think as a quarterback in the NFL, the same thing does apply. Daniel Jones has plenty of experience as an NFL starter. Anthony Richardson has plenty of experience as an NFL starter. But right now, what both of them are going through are relatively new. Anthony Richardson was handed the keys right here. Hear that sound? That's the keys that were handed to Anthony Richardson the second he first got off the bus, essentially, here in Westfield as a rookie. They said from the get-go, you know what, he's the starter. And they just went with it. And I thought Bob Kravitz made a very interesting point yesterday on social media when he said, it's interesting now that the Colts are preaching or asking for patience with Richardson when it was the Colts and not the rest of us that accelerated his progress as an NFL quarterback and just handed it to him from the get-go. There was no patience in the beginning. But now we are expected to grant it. But this is a new situation to an extent for Richardson because outwardly, by definition, he is in the midst of a quarterback battle. And in the past, yes, I think we knew that he was, but he wasn't by necessarily definition of what a battle is. And now he's in that situation. And then you get Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is in a unique situation because Daniel Jones now finds himself in the position where, and I think this will be interesting to talk to him about over the course of camp. And I was going to ask him about it today, but then, had some other things where I had to come over and do in getting ready for the show when Daniel Jones was talking to the media. But Daniel Jones, a guy that was drafted, obviously, in a high position by the New York Giants. He was given opportunity from the get-go in his career as a New York Giant, and for a while there made the most of it. When he had players around him, I think was a pretty good player. And then obviously things went south in New York and the kind of surprise of the mid-year release, and now here he is in Indianapolis with a one-year opportunity to kind of reinvent or re-show what he can do. But for Jones, it has to be a unique situation and a bizarre, almost stuck between a rock and a hard place feeling. Because, yes, he wants to come in here and win a starting job. Of course. He wants to come in here and win a starting job and win games in the NFL because he is in position to then get a contract out of it, whether it be in Indianapolis or elsewhere. He's on a deal where if he shows himself here, he can make a significant amount of money still at a relatively young age. And so he wants to make the most of that opportunity. But he also knows that part of the role that he has here, at least in terms of from a team standpoint, and I'm using that a little bit in air quotes, but his job also is as a team to come in and help with the quarterback situation with Anthony Richardson. I know that sounds crazy because they're competing against one another. But at the same time, you naturally get that with most quarterbacks. Now, there have been some quarterbacks that have come into situations and said, it's not my job. It's not my job to groom that guy. I'm here to play quarterback. I'm here to win this job, and it's not my job to play teacher. And I get that. But for Daniel Jones, you would think that when he's coming into this situation, that he's coming into said situation and doing so while looking at it and saying, I've got a sympathy, a compassion, an understanding of what Anthony Richardson's going through. Because guess what? Anthony Richardson as an Indianapolis Colt right now is right on the precipice of being Daniel Jones as a New York Giant. Daniel Jones as a New York Giant got opportunity very early on, made the most of it, got everybody super excited, then regressed, players around him kind of faded away or were sent elsewhere. And then he regressed and fell out of favor. And Daniel Jones, if there's anybody that knows what Anthony Richardson is going through or feeling at the moment, it absolutely would be Daniel Jones. And so you wonder if Daniel Jones is not, in fact, looking at it. And even though he has a situation where he is ready to win that job, he also understands kind of the tenuous nature of it, if you will, if that makes sense that way. So it's a gorgeous day here in Westfield. It is absolutely perfect where we are right now because fortunately we're inside of a tent and there's a slight breeze going through. It's a little stuffy, a little warm, admittedly, but that's probably also part of the reason why the Colts, in terms of their practice throughout the day today and their activity on field, is done by 11 o'clock, and that's going to be the case for the course of the week. They are done at 11:15 on Friday, but done at 11 o'clock here today, and then I would assume they now are in, meetings, film sessions, etc., and will not be out on the field for the remainder of the day. Eddie Garrison is back in studio on Monument Circle, and Eddie, a big one lined up today, including, and I'm guessing that as the pre- and post-game host of their radio broadcast, which last night we saw a disappointment for the Fever in New York, but you already have placed your order for their new jerseys, correct?
I have not yet. I have not placed that order yet, but I may because they look pretty cool.
So do you watch – so Stranger Things is a show on Netflix. It is entering season number 5, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
I think. I'm not sure. I don't watch it.
So it is one season ahead of Alec Pierce. But having said that, the Stranger Things show, which obviously fictionally takes place in the state of Indiana, and the Fever are now wearing – Eddie, you're a younger, hipper guy than myself, so you can fill me in. Their new jerseys are, in fact paying tribute, right? This is the Fever are doing to Stranger Things what the Pacers did for Hickory, but fortunately they're not wearing it out the way the Pacers did with the Hickory thing, right? Yeah,
it's not the first time that they've done this partnership either, Jake. I think it's like the second or third time that the Fever have had a Stranger Things uniform. So it's pretty cool. If you haven't seen the photos, go to the Fever Twitter. You can see Aaliyah Boston, Caitlin Clark, and Kelsey Mitchell in the uniforms. Lexi Hull as well, and yeah, they're pretty cool. They're like dark black with some red and mixed in with white.
It's the color scheme that's super cool about them, right?
Yeah.
And now, when did they wear them before? Because this one, I think it's the color scheme that's different than they were in the past. Am I correct?
I believe they did this back in 2021. Yeah, they debuted back in 2021. Yep.
Okay. Would you like to know? I'm going to give you a Jake Query probably unpopular opinion. And I don't want to lump like Matt Taylor into this, for example. Matt Taylor's sitting just in front of me, the voice of the Colts. And Matt's acting like he's busy and he's got headsets on and he's transcribing interviews, so he's not listening to the show, or at least he's acting like he's not. But I'll bet Matt Taylor would agree with me on this. And, Eddie, I want you to tell me if you agree or disagree. This is probably unpopular opinion, and it's an odd one to throw out on the opening day of Colts training camp practice day number 1. But we have plenty of time to get you caught up on everything that took place over the course of simply the 1 hour practice to open things up today. Here's my unpopular opinion. People can let me know if they agree or disagree. But my unpopular opinion is that while I loved and understood the significance, the importance, and the cool factor of the Pacers wearing the uniforms like the Hickory Huskers, at the same time, it went way too long and wore itself out way too quickly. And by the last 60% of the time period in which they were wearing the Hickory jerseys, my thought process during that was, are we still doing this? Are we still doing this? Like, it's a little played out by now. Now, Eddie, you tell me. You're a younger guy. You're more hip than myself. Yes or no? Agree or disagree? Unpopular or popular opinion?
I agree with you. I never really cared for the uniforms in the first place.
Really?
No.
I think people liked him in the beginning, right?
Maybe.
I mean, I definitely –
because it's like, oh, look, this is cool.
Okay. I mean, I just thought – did I just hear you say something in my ear, by the way, Eddie? Did somebody just jump in my ear there?
I did,
okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it. You were telling me actually to get to break because Alec Pierce is going to come over and join us. Is that correct? Okay, Alec Pierce, who is entering year number 4 for the Colts, the wide receiver, is going to join us on the other side. We're going to find out, for example, which of the two quarterbacks, is there a preference on which one he has felt more comfortable with so far in this year number 4 getting underway for Alec Pierce, and a contract year as well. So where do things stand with that? We will get into that with Alec Pierce. Big show lined up again. Zach Osterman Osterman going to join us 1 o'clock. Adam Alexander going to join us 2 o'clock. 1:30 hour, we'll talk a little bit more about the Fever and what happened last night. But when we come back, he will be entering year number 4 as a wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts after being a draft pick, of course, from the University of Cincinnati. Alec Pierce joins us other side, Grand Park, Westfield, Query & Company here on a Wednesday on The Fan. from Bet365 by predicting the winner of this year's Brickyard 400. I personally think you should get $1,500 if you predict Dick Trickle and he wins, but that would be something, wouldn't it? Denny Hamlin looking for his 4th win of the year. He might be a clubhouse leader. Kyle Larson as well. Joey Logano, who's been on with this radio show. Plenty to choose from. Do your homework, make a pick, try to win $500, all available at 1075thefan.com, courtesy of our friends at Bet365. Colts camp up here at Grand Park in Westfield. It is day number 1. Practice is in the books. It went from 10 until just after 11 o'clock. And joining us now here in Grand Park, he is entering his 4th year for the Indianapolis Colts, which is hard to believe, Alec Pierce, that this is year number 4 for you. But good to see you again. Let's begin right to it, actually, just in terms of getting that first practice under the belt. How'd it go today?
Went well. I think it was, as expected, first practice. I feel like a little rusty, everybody, just definitely have a lot to improve on, but that's what camp's for. Going to look at the tape, and just continue to get better on things, work timing, just small details and stuff.
Your position is an interesting one because to me, when you look in the NFL in general, and certainly your position coach in Reggie Wayne is kind of the poster child of this. Receiver seems to be the position sometimes that we have to be the most patient with guys, and I think you've showed that because in your rookie year, admittedly there were a lot of people that were like, man, what's going on with Alec Pierce? Then we started to see what can happen when you can get behind defenses. When you look back on year 1 into year 2, how difficult was it?
Yeah, it's a lot different. I think just in terms of coming from college, just like for me, everything was different in terms of like the way they called the plays, the way you lined up, just the amount of details that went into everything. I think you're asked a lot more in terms of like knowing what to do, which routes to run. Like I think I didn't run a ton, like the biggest route tree in college, so kind of being asked to do more. So it takes a little while to kind of learn and add that stuff to your game and kind of figure out like, okay, like on this route here, like pick up little things on how to get open and what to do and stuff like that. So I think it definitely is like truly an art, and I think it takes a little bit of time to figure that out.
What point, if you look back at the first 3 years, at what point did it finally start to kind of slow down? I always say when you start a new job, you can't wait for the day when you don't know what day of the week it is because it's just you're in a routine. That happened for you when?
I would say somewhere between somewhere maybe in my 2nd year, sometime during the season, or because I feel like my rookie year, it took probably the whole year to kind of master the offense and know exactly what was going on. Like, obviously I knew where to line up and knew what to do, but just like for it to be kind of like second nature, like a different language, like you could say the play and I'd know kind of all the positions and stuff like that. It took me probably about the whole year to say I'd master it, and then we changed coaches, so that changed up some things, and kind of same thing happened. Probably not as long of a process, but I bet it still took me a little while, maybe into that 2nd year, to kind of get things to really slow down.
Did you ever feel like you were in the beginning, maybe even to this point, that it's been difficult because you've had to change quarterbacks a lot as well?
I mean, that's definitely a challenge. I try to be, for me, I just focus on myself, and I try to be the most consistent and just like detailed. Like they're gonna tell us, okay, this route we want you to get to 15 yards, we want you to break here on this foot. I try to make sure things are just very like to the paper, to the T, like very detailed, because I know especially it's tough for the quarterbacks. Like if you have your guy like Reggie playing with Peyton or even Andrew Luck for a while, like they had probably such good chemistry going that it might have been like Peyton might have understood, okay, Reggie might do this here, Marvin might do this here, Well,
so there comes with almost like Alec Pierce, our guest here, does there not, with almost like a, quarterbacks have told me before, and receivers, just like a look.
Yeah.
Like you can kind of look down the line and then you both just know. Have you ever felt, and I mean this is no knock on him, but just because of the in and out nature of it, have you ever gotten that with Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know, especially for me, like I know what plays that are really kind of like my money plays, like where I know I'm gonna get the ball, it's the stuff that I kind of do the best. So I think there's always
run
that
really far and turn around. That's it, right?
Stuff like that. Run deep, run fast, run by people, run away from people. Any of those kind of like dynamic, explosive plays, I feel like a lot of times get dialed up for me, and I feel like a lot of times it's like you might get a look. You might get a look here. Okay, we got some pressure, or we got a lot of tight man coverage here, and that's where you might get that look, and you kind of know like like he's looking to come to you here, even though it might not have been a route that was like necessarily during the week. We thought it was, during practice he might have thrown to the other guy, but it's a different defensive look here that we weren't anticipating. So you might give you that kind of that look, and you see it, and you're kind of like, okay, let me make sure I really run my best route here, and get open.
How much in the NFL is like sandlot football? Honestly, like how much do you ever have plays where you're in a huddle and you just say like, listen, man, I'm telling you, like they're cheating on this side. Let's just go with it.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think we very much at all do that. I feel like there's some teams you watch and they might like you said, it might be more of a when you get a little bit more connected, or it might just be different philosophies with different coaches. But for us, I feel like it's pretty detailed. We do have some stuff, where it does get a little bit more, option based and kind of more like feel, and you can go kind of either way with it. But it's all pretty scripted. It's not really sandlot.
What is the difference between catching a pass from Anthony Richardson and catching a pass from Daniel Jones, just in terms of the release point, the break point when they hit you?
Yeah.
Tell me the difference of the two.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, honestly, I don't know if I really feel much of a difference. Like I almost have to consciously like look before the play or after the play and be like, because I honestly won't even really notice the difference, because right now RVAs, and team, we're out there rotating. Obviously team, I hear it in the huddle, so I know who's talking then, and I see who it is. But if you're out there RVAs, like, you might catch a ball, and I have to look back, okay, who threw that one there? Because I think they throw pretty similar balls, and that's a compliment to both of them.
Alec Pierce is our guest. Colts camp getting underway today. We're at Grand Park up here in Westfield. A big year for you, obviously, from, let's be real, a financial standpoint here, right? When you're in a contract year, the mindset of that as a professional is what?
I mean, for me, everything's always been just taking things day by day. That's kind of just the way I live life. So I just try to focus on camp, focus on coming out here, seeing what I can do every day, continue to prove to the coaches, prove to the quarterbacks, prove to myself, just earn more reps, earn more balls in the game and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I attack things.
But if you look at it, so you've started 41 of 49 games, right, in 3 years. And a year ago, I think you took a big step. 824 yards, 7 touchdowns. Clearly, I think at that point it's like, okay, Alec Pierce is a part of this offense and a part of what you want to go towards moving forward. So based on that, isn't there a part of you that says, what's the hesitation, let's get this done?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of complications that goes into things. I think it's like that's up to the front office and all those guys. But yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not trying to do double man coverage here, right? I'm not trying to do press coverage, but from your standpoint, would there be a piece with it of knowing? I know that. Look, you got to be confident in what you can do, but at the same time, I would think that there would have to be some sort of a pressure that comes off if you know that you're locked in going into the year, as opposed to again still playing for that for another season.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure that would be a pressure taken off, but I don't know. To me, I look at things. You earn your keep, you earn your way every single day. So I don't view it as like any more extra pressure. I think it's just like every day here's a blessing, and you got to just keep on working on that.
By the way, you look like you've been running like 10 miles a day and lifting weights regularly, and you're a little bit tan. I want to know what the off-season regimen is here.
Yeah, I'm outside all the time, so that helps with the tan. But just work out. Usually would hit the field first, and then go lift some weights, and then afternoon probably go play golf or something if I got people around that wanted to play.
What is in all honesty, Alec Pierce, what is the off-season regimen, especially for a receiver, right? Because, conditioning for everybody is a big deal, but for you, obviously, speed, all of that goes into it. When the season is over with, you've got to let your body rest, then you got to keep your body in shape. There's a lot of a balancing act there. Can you kind of walk me through what life as an NFL player is like in non-NFL season?
Yeah. For me, I feel like I usually – right after the season, I've gone on like a big trip the past 2 years. So kind of get away. Probably give myself about a month of not even thinking about football in terms of like working out, and I might go hit some like yoga or something pretty light like Pilates, but I'm not really even like lifting weights yet. And then probably once like February comes along, or however, like 4 weeks after the season, I'll probably start doing some like weightlifting. But depending on how the body's feeling, just more so just attack like just making sure my body's feeling good. So probably more like weightlifting and less like cutting and stuff like that. And,
How long into that month vacation is it before you feel normal?
Honestly, I feel like I've learned. I learned this year. Like, I think the time off is not the best thing for you. I think it's like, I think it would be better to stay active and or like just go like light activity. And I do, because I went on vacation. I was very like active. I was
Where'd you go?
I went out to Japan and then Thailand and Singapore.
Nice.
So I was all over. There's a lot of flights, but yeah, like we out there in Thailand, we're like hiking through the jungle basically. Like, so we're moving around. We're at the beach. So
this humidity's nothing for you, right?
Right. It was like this every day there. So yeah, that was a good time. I actually went with a couple of teammates. So
Daniel Jones was talking, Alec Pierce, just a couple of minutes ago, as a matter of fact, about kind of getting to know this roster, and talked about you guys getting together, I think, in California, and just the importance of acclimating to one another aside from the field.
Yeah.
Your takeaway from that was what?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, I'm such a firm believer in that. Even going back to college, I just know like my college team was so tight. Everyone was such good friends with each other, and just such great camaraderie between the team. So I think what we did this year, this off season, just even though it was a pretty quick trip, able to get in some work, but then just really kind of connect with each other outside of football, outside of the building. Because I noticed a lot of guys I got a lot closer with on that trip who might be a little bit more closed off when they're in the building because they might just not feel comfortable. I don't know. So,
such as?
Like a big one was Tyler Warren. Like, I didn't get a word out of him during OTAs. I introduced myself, and I feel like he was just very much like focused. He's probably stressed trying to figure out the offense, stuff like that. But once we went out to Cali, he was a good time.
How big does he become, though, offensively for you guys? Because he can kind of get that middle area of the field where defenses have to be honest about that, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of, theoretically, that opens you up, right?
For sure. No, I think having, tight ends are such valuable pieces of offenses. You look at across the league, like a lot of teams, just do such great things with the tight ends. So I think it'll just only make our offense better.
What was your favorite sport growing up?
Football.
What's your best sport?
Football. That's it. I mean, it's coming out here. There's another one that you believe in. I was good at volleyball, and I was good at track too, but probably football.
I would think track you'd be really good. Now volleyball is interesting because men's volleyball is, I mean, that's nonstop action, man.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Like the athleticism that goes into that. You also went to Wrigley recently, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about the Wrigley experience, because Wrigley was awesome.
Yeah, I grew up a diehard Cubs fan, so probably was my favorite, professional sports team out of any team. So I went out there, I got the opportunity to throw the first pitch back in April. It's actually really fun. I brought a bunch of teammates up there because it was kind of like the same thing as going out to Cali. It's like good little weekend trip to OTAs, early OTAs. It's like everyone's back. I'm like, hey guys, I'm from around there, so I kind of know the city. So I was like, let's go up here, let's grab an Airbnb and just have a fun weekend there. We can go to a nice dinner.
You got to do Wrigleyville, right?
Yeah, so we got there.
Wrigleyville?
We were out there Wrigleyville after. It was so many people there. It was a good time. So.
How many people realized when you were out in Wrigleyville just who exactly they were in Wrigleyville with?
I do a pretty good job of blending in, but they gave me a jersey that said 14 Pierce on it, so. I think when people saw that, it blends in because everyone's got the white and blue pinstripes on. But I think if people really looked at it, they might have noticed. So.
Now, most importantly, on the first pitch, did you go for a legit first pitch or just do a toss? Because people get in trouble with this.
So I kind of got in trouble, I think, because I was gonna go with the heater, and I was.
It's further than you think, isn't it?
Yeah, I was working on the heater, and. But they brought out the mascot, and he had just like a cartoon glove. It was like a 4-foot glove on, and he's got the thing on his head.
Clark, isn't that his name? Clark.
Yeah, Clark. So he's got the head on. So I'm like, can he really see? And he's got that huge glove. So I kind of lobbed it a little bit more, and I think. I mean, Conti said, like, Clark stepped back, right? He gave me a bad. He's got to get glove on that.
So we're
thing.
blaming the catcher. Is that it?
I think he backed up. He kind of let it one hop, but I think he could have got the glove to it.
Okay, so
it's a little low. It's a ball low.
You threw out the first pitch. Josh Downs, your teammate, did say on this radio station that you are the best player on the roster in one particular sport. What sport was it?
He probably said golf.
He did say golf.
He said golf? Okay.
Yes.
So I might just, yeah, that's
Your
Daniel Jones would like to argue with that.
Your handicap is what?
6.
It's solid.
Yeah.
Solid, right?
Yeah, we don't have the best golfers here. We're working on it though.
So, wait a minute. So you're the best golfer by default. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. I don't know. I've gotten a lot better this year, but I was gonna say I was probably about a 10 handicap last year, and maybe the best.
NFL players have no excuse. You got the
They got so much time.
Correct, right?
Yeah, it's
obviously.
Yeah, you can't. The thing about football that's like, I talk to my brothers are basketball players. I talk about this all the time. It's like, I can't run routes for 5 hours a day every single day. It'd be like, I don't even know what would happen with your body at that point. You're gonna hurt yourself. So it's like you go out there and if you're hitting the field right and doing like a receiver work, like you can't ever be out there for more than like an hour and a half. Like your body's gonna be done.
I mean,
so
you can wear it down, can't you? Because
can wear
there's talk
yourself
about
down,
that, honestly, Alec. Like you look at the NBA and the number of, and obviously in this town, Achilles injuries. I hate saying it, but there is discussion that perhaps that's coming from overuse in the offseason. Now, is that the dumbest thing you've ever heard, or do you think there could be some legitimacy to that?
Oh man, I'm not sure.
I know you're not a doctor, but
I'm no doctor. I mean, I think you got to look at like the past and maybe like how that injury has increased or if it's kind of stayed the same over these years. Because and then just compare it to like how much they practice and do off-season stuff compared to they did in the past. I don't know. It's probably hard to kind of correlate those two.
Your brother's a basketball player. Lastly, did you at least become a Pacer fan in the last couple of months?
Oh man, I'm fully on the Pacers bandwagon. Yeah, I'd say I'm definitely a Pacers fan. Man, these past 2 years have been super fun. Got an opportunity to go to a bunch of games, especially those playoffs games. Were so
Do you get to know those guys at all?
I don't know them a ton. I met Obi and James Johnson out on the golf course one time. Those are the only guys I think I've ever. Oh, and I've seen Ben Shepherd around a few times.
Better golfer of those two, which one?
I don't know. I wasn't playing with them, but I've heard that. I heard James Johnson's really good.
Really?
You gotta ask.
He's a martial artist. You know that,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, I know. He sounds like he's like jack of all trades. Sounds like he can do everything. But I think he said or JT, our rookie. Said he's like cousins or second cousins or something. So you have to ask him about it if you get him because he told me that James Johnson's a good golfer.
James Johnson's in the same situation as you, right? There's question contract. Not that there's question if you'll be back. But,
so is he a free agent right now?
He is. Well, they
got to bring him back.
Their roster's full, and so then they've got to create some space there. But
yeah, that's tough.
But so I guess actually the last thing would be this: James Johnson is a glue guy for the Pacers. Mm-hmm. He's one of those guys that he doesn't have to be on the floor to make his impact.
Yeah.
That player for the Colts is who?
Tyquan Lewis, maybe. Tyquan Lewis, or I'm trying to think of that guy just like great locker room presence. Tyquan's probably a good pick. I would say Ashton Doolin, but I think Ash is very important to our team in a lot of aspects.
Also a jack of all trades guy, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. It could be Ashton Doolin, kind of the thankless jobs and stuff, but yeah, no, that's a guy that. If you really, really know football and you really watch the tape, he's one of the best at what he does in the NFL. So,
a year ago, 824 yards, 37 catches over the course of the year, 7 touchdowns, and again, entering year number 4. Hard to believe that for Alec Pierce. Alec, appreciate the time. Certainly wish you the best of luck in camp, and most importantly, good health to you, and then the contract status as well. Best of luck on how that plays out. We'd love to have you stick around.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Alec Pierce here on the program. Coming up, may try to check in with our buddy Zach Osterman to find out yesterday some of the things that Curt Cignetti had to say from an Indiana football standpoint. Adam Alexander is going to be on the television call for the Brickyard 400 coming up on Sunday. He's going to join us 2 o'clock hour as well as we roll along here from Grand Park in Westfield. Colts Camp Edition, Query and Company here on The Fan. Okay, let's get you caught up on what has been taking place here over the course of today at Colts camp. Zach Osterman-Osterman going to join us coming up about 15 minutes from now. Indiana football yesterday, Curt Cignetti, once again as he does, making some interesting comments. In particular, how does Indiana football compare and fit in as a member of the SEC? Well, we'll tell you about that coming up when Zach joins us in about 15 minutes. But here is the nuts and bolts, if you will, the who, what, where, why, and when of Colts camp. Grand Park in Westfield is where I'm broadcasting live currently. Practice resumed for the Colts after the long layoff with this practice number 1 and the newest and first installment of practice for the 25 season here at Grand Park. It got done about 11, just shortly after 11 o'clock today, and there were highs and lows at the quarterback position. You can't read too much into it after one practice, obviously. Shane Steichen said afterwards that, in particular with Anthony Richardson, that he saw some things from Anthony Richardson that he considered to be very positive. Take that for what it's worth, obviously. Daniel Jones as well. Jones did throw an interception today. Again, read into that as you may, whatever that may mean. I don't know that you can overly evaluate or assess anything through one practice. But you can at least get some feel for what takes place from a personnel standpoint. When the Colts first went out on the field, the quarterback under center was Daniel Jones. But that alternated with pretty severe regularity. Severe is the wrong word. That alternated with regularity. And so essentially when it comes to the starting reps, Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson, kind of a wash if you were trying to figure that out. And in addition to that, in terms of the consistency, the same. Jones threw an interception, had a couple of throws he probably would like to have back, had a couple where he looked pretty good. The same with Anthony Richardson. He had one throw which probably will be posted on social media where he overthrew Mo Alley-Cox, but he also had several where he hit receivers in stride. The significant thing about the quarterback battle would probably be the fact that both quarterbacks, when they were going out, were taking their snaps from Taylor Bortolini, who I think we can say is going to be the starting center. I thought personally Bortolini did a really nice job a year ago when he was put into the center position. Danny Pinter would be the other one vying for that spot. But Bortolini was handling the center duties today almost exclusively. There were a couple of errant snaps and handoffs, that kind of thing, but that comes with timing and over the course of time. Chris Ballard, for as much as he has been criticized in the past, notably, I've been critical of Chris Ballard at times, in particular with some of his drafting and reaching on drafts and things like that. But if there's an area where he does deserve a lot of credit, I think one of them is in every general manager since the beginning of time touts themselves as being somebody that knows and understands the trenches and is good at building in the trenches and believes in the trenches. And that is an area where Chris Ballard, truthfully, has been pretty solid and been pretty strong. I think that he has built nice depth in their offensive line in particular over the course of years. I mean, Bernard Ryman was has he had some swings and misses? Of course, everybody does. But he has had a few picks that at the time were eyebrow-raising, and they panned out for him. Bernard Ryman would certainly be one of them, who I think may be joining the show this week. We'll see on that. But he has certainly become what we expect to be a long-term pillar at the left tackle position on the left side of the line. And Bortolini is one that I think is going to be a good player for them. And with obviously moving on from Ryan Kelly gives you some stability, and they saw that today. The other thing that happened today of note, and again, one practice does not a season make. I mean, we obviously are aware of and know that. But one thing that did happen today was the fact that at the cornerback position, their draft pick, and we had him on the show. Eddie, if I'm not mistaken, we had Justin Wally on the show very shortly after he was drafted, correct? Maybe within the week of the draft?
We did, yes.
Really likable personality, right?
Oh, yeah. Very energetic, and you can see why, Chris Ballard called him a pit bull, I think, yesterday when he met with 2 days ago or whatever it was, when he met with the media at the start of training camp, and they're very excited, and with the next pick or whatever they call Behind the Colts or whatever they call that YouTube series that they've got going, and you can tell that how much they really like him, and it just sounds like and feels like he's a Lou Anarumo-type corner, Jake. And I know we were talking about position battles and whatnot, and it felt like Jalen Jones had the head start on that starting outside cornerback spot next to Travarius Ward, but Stephen Holder pointed this out, that you have to remember that this is a different regime. It's a different defensive coordinator, and you don't know what he's going to want from his cornerbacks. And he went out and they went and got Travarius Ward for Lou Anarumo, and then they go into the draft and they take Justin Wally. They trade up for him, and they find the guy that they really like. And now there just seems to be a quarterback competition between Jalen Jones, Justin Wally, and Juju Brents for that second outside corner spot.
And right now, Justin Wally is the guy that, again, one practice does not a preseason nor even a season make, but Justin Wally is the guy that was getting the majority of those reps today. So he started out, did the young rookie corner, he started out as the guy that they turned to right away and was working with the first unit. So that is something certainly to watch. And as Eddie just mentioned there, Jalen Jones, the other one that was rotating in with him, but Wally was getting the majority of those snaps. And Chris Ballard spoke very favorably of him yesterday and talked up just how much he likes that young player and believes in what he might be able to do for them. Tyler Warren is a guy that, we're going to see a lot of, no question about it. You just heard Alec Pierce talking about him. I think Warren is starting to kind of introduce himself, if you will, to the offense. And afterwards, when I was able to listen in on and sit in on the press conference, we were getting ready to talk to Alec Pierce, so I couldn't necessarily get a complete ear on everything that Shane Steichen was saying. But Shane Steichen's takeaways from today: number one, he was at least publicly positive about what they were trying to do. He did say that one of the things that they really want to work on this year is they went back, and in the offseason in particular, they realized that the percentage of NFL games that are now being decided within the final 2 to 3 drives are increasing year by year. And Shane Steichen felt like this Colts team was not where they needed to be in terms of that precision late in games and handling kind of frantic moments. And so they're trying to create throughout this camp those hurry-up moments, those moments where quick decisions have to be made and you've got to immediately be reactive. That's something that they want to work on more now than perhaps they did a year ago. And he did say with Lou Anarumo, one of the things that he liked was that defensively he feels like Anarumo in particular is going to put a lot of pressure on, for lack of a better phrase, the back half of the defense. So the defensive backs and the back area of the defense, that he is going to create different looks for that group and have them move around a little bit based on what they are seeing offensively and what they're hearing from the linebackers. And that is going to create a learning curve for the lingo, the sets, the positioning of where they need to be. Those are some of the things after just one practice that were discussed today after the Colts were on the practice field. Outside of that, there really was not a whole lot that jumped out as water cooler conversation, but that's kind of a starting point on what we're going to be watching here over the course of this camp and what we will talk about over the course of today as well. Yesterday, Kurt Cignetti made some interesting comments about Indiana football and the SEC. What's the connection? Our buddy from the Indianapolis Star, Zach
Osterman.
Thank you, Eddie. Joins us next. It is not the Eagles that were flying, but rather the Colts. Because what do they say after every single practice in the NFL? Guys were just flying around making plays. Flying around making plays. Although I didn't hear that so much today. It was just practice number 1 for the Colts. Grand Park up in Westfield. The location here on a very warm but admittedly pleasant day. Nice little breeze coming through. A little bit quiet now. It will pick back up tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. Joining us now on the always busy and once again available to be sponsored guest line, he is our friend from the Indianapolis Star. He is the athletic beat writer for Indiana University, talking about Zach Osterman that joins us, although we now know it's Osterman because we have the recording of it. That's correct, right, Eddie, if you hit that?
Osterman.
That is correct, yeah. Zach joining us now. Before we get to Zach, Curt Cignetti and his comments yesterday and how it relates to the SEC for Indiana football, esoterically speaking, I will simply say I did not know until recently that Liverpool, England is amongst your favorite cities in the world. And after having visited there, I concur entirely. It is really nice. And I was surprised. I don't know that I mentioned this when I came back, but the stereotype, like from the Beatles era of Liverpool, and certainly this might have been the case in the early 60s, was that it's like this gritty, bloody-knuckled, blue-collar shipping yard town, and yet a lot of the neighborhoods of it to me reminded me of the near north side of like Meridian, Kessler, or even Lockerbie area of Indianapolis. I thought it was extremely quaint, friendly, and it was a day like today when I was there, so it was very, very pretty. I thought really, really a cool town.
Yeah, people I think will know I'm a fan of Liverpool Football Club, and that's obviously kind of how I found the city. But I get a lot more excited now when people tell me they're visiting Liverpool than when they want to talk about the club, because a lot of what you said there is at least sort of broad strokes true. It was a very blue collar town. Obviously, was a very sort of shipping heavy town for a lot of its modern history. But even then, a lot of that wealth was kind of centered in a small class, and so it's always had a real sort of working class part. Very defiant, very outward looking, which is kind of unusual for the country of England. For a long time, English policy was to make the world England. Liverpool has never really felt that way. It's always reflected the world much more so than its own country, and you get that from just the wonderful blend of cultures. There's incredible food, incredible nightlife, incredible architecture. Right there on the river, so you have, just right there, well, not just on the river, but if you go just a little bit north on the sea as well. And it's not too big, so it's very walkable. People are very friendly. It's very easy to have a great night out in Liverpool. I went over for a match in 2017, and I always tell people I went over for a football match, and I came back in love with the city. So anybody who needs it, I know there are Disney planners out there. Anybody who needs a Liverpool planner, I'm your man. I'm already formulating for a buddy who's covering the British Open next year at Royal Birkdale. So the wheels are already in motion for that one. I'm happy to get anybody else an itinerary if they need it.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a very cool town. All right, let's get to what Curt Cignetti said yesterday. I thought one of the things that was interesting, and I wanted you to, and I hope I'm not, we did not pre-plan our conversation here, so, but it was via one of your stories that I think that I saw that Curt Cignetti said this. I thought Curt Cignetti had an interesting comparison to Indiana football and the SEC, and by that I mean, Zach, not necessarily in where they are like competitiveness or whatever else, but rather just in terms of formula and strategy of scheduling and the way that Indiana, because there's been a lot of discussion about the drop of Virginia on the schedule, and I thought Curt Cignetti made an interesting point when talking about some of the elite-level programs in college football, and notably he pointed out the SEC and the way that they do things, and that he liked that blueprint. Can you elaborate for our listeners on exactly what the strategy is from Indiana's standpoint for scheduling?
Yeah, so rewind back to 2023. This was when Tom Allen was still the head coach. Indiana bought out of the last 2 years of a series with Louisville. And its reasoning was, we'll make up the money and then some by scheduling home games, winnable home games, the games that have turned into FCS or maybe, group of 5 home games. And at the time, Indiana was pretty open about just saying, of course, expectations were different then, that it was just trying to create a path to being more consistently competitive, basically making it easier to get into bowl games and to build kind of a firmer foundation underneath the program, and recognizing that football success is kind of the ultimate form of agency in modern college athletics. Scott Dolson knew he needed to make it easier in a 9-game Big Ten schedule world for his head football coach to map out a postseason path. Fast forward to where we are now, no one would have seen Indiana become a playoff contender, a playoff participant, and therefore, kind of a bit of a, I don't know, I guess in some places a straw man or a punching bag because of Indiana's scheduling philosophy. Curt Cignetti was asked about it, I think, in a sort of widely public way for the first time yesterday, because recently Indiana also bought out of a 2-year series with Virginia, which was further down the line. Indiana also dropped a trip to UConn off its schedule a few months ago as well. And Cignetti said that philosophy predated me, but I signed off on it when I came in because I think it makes sense. A lot of the criticism has come from our friends down south who have, I think, probably turned Indiana into a bit of a lightning rod for their complaints about the Big Ten and the playoff just in general. We don't have to rehash all of the 9-win Alabama versus 11-win Indiana from last fall for everyone to kind of remember that, the SEC seemed to sort of chafe at the idea of an interloper without as many signature wins, jumping over an Ole Miss team that lost to Kentucky or an Alabama team that lost to Vanderbilt. And SEC, critics and the SEC and elsewhere have said, you're not challenging yourself at all in the non-conference. That's weak. That's cowardly scheduling. Curt Cignetti's point is the SEC only plays 8 conference games. Now, culturally, the SEC has resisted going to 9, in part because there are, unlike the Big Ten, a lot of historical rivalries that are out of conference. Georgia plays Georgia Tech, Florida plays Florida State, South Carolina plays Clemson, Kentucky, Louisville, and so forth. But Cignetti's point is that's just a 9th Power 5 game or Power 4 game on your schedule. We already play 9. Because we play a 9-game conference schedule, we're already where you're going to just by playing these rivalry games or just by setting up, maybe a non-conference game, Texas, Michigan, or something like that. And the point he made, the point he made is if you look at the other 3 games on the average SEC non-conference schedule, they look just like what Indiana's non-conference schedule looks like and what Indiana's strategy looks like. And he dropped that Cignetti kind of one-liner about we thought we'd just go with an SEC scheduling philosophy. I mean, that there's a little bit of the Steve Spurrier in that. We know Cignetti likes a touch of dry humor, but his point was we're already playing 9 Power 5 games. You play 9. The average SEC school plays 9 Power 5 games too, and then does generally what Indiana does with the other 3 games on its schedule. And really what he was trying to say is, and he articulated it well, and of course nobody listened to it because Twitter grabbed one sentence and went nuts, is there is a need for scheduling uniformity across college football, and there are different ways that all sides can kind of meet in the middle on that. But as long as we have some conferences that play 8 and some that play 9 and some that have, this set of priorities and some that have this set of priorities, and we don't even have a settled format for the playoffs, everybody's just going to kind of have to do what they think is best for them. And his point was Indiana's schedule in the average year, if you just wipe off, what games are conference games and what games aren't, doesn't look that different to the average SEC schedule.
When you think about it, Zach, let's be real here. If you were going to play an outside, like a Power 5 pre-conference opponent, you would almost have to make it. It's difficult to do 5 to 7 years out. I think that's the biggest challenge. But whether you're Purdue, Indiana, whoever it may be, wouldn't it behoove you to only schedule an opponent that if you were to lose to them, it would not be a demerit per se and hurt you really in terms of your bowl your bowl standings or seedings or even playoff contention if you're Indiana or where Purdue ultimately would like to be. But in other words, like a Virginia, and I admire it and appreciate it, and I liked having a Virginia on the schedule. But the reality is, if you beat Virginia, people go, okay. But if you lose to Virginia, then it's like, whoa, like bad loss for the playoffs or whatever else. But if you go with a Texas A&M or a, I'm trying to think of another school that, falls into that same level of category. Yeah, give me, you know what I mean? Like, in other words, if you lose to them, it's not a huge demerit.
Indiana's got a series on the books with Notre Dame for, I think it's 2030 and 2031.
Yeah, perfect example,
I don't think anything's decided that far out for IU yet, but my sense from asking around is there's a lot more appetite to keep that on the schedule.
Right.
I think to the point that you're making, which is win or lose, that is a game that has value if you are trying to build a competitive resume, whether it's to make the playoff, whether it's just to be, frankly, just to be a serious football team, 8-9 wins plus. That is a game that has value. To your point, Virginia maybe would in 2 or 3 years, maybe wouldn't. When Indiana scheduled that Louisville series, if I'm remembering correctly, it was right around the time Lamar Jackson was at Louisville, so Louisville looked like a really formidable opponent. Then Louisville, kind of post-Lamar Jackson, freighted under Bobby Petrino and had to recycle some things and then gets Jeff Brom, and now Louisville's on the upswing again. And if Indiana had played like Scott Satterfield Louisville, maybe that means something, maybe it doesn't. On the other hand, if Indiana had played and beaten Louisville on the road last season, it would have meant something. It would have been something very meaningful to their playoff resume. We probably wouldn't be having this specific discussion, but that's the difference. That's why a series like Notre Dame, I think there's more appetite for that than there is Virginia, certainly than there is, a UConn on the road, something like that. Now, to your point, it's hard to make all those pieces fit into place because, everybody wants to do their schedule 6, 7, 8 years out. Well, what happens if you try to play, Ole Miss? And right now, Ole Miss is a great program, but 5, 6, 7 years from now, Lane Kiffin has left for Alabama, and they've gotten a couple hires wrong, and Ole Miss is winning 3 games a year in the SEC, then it suddenly doesn't feel quite so impactful. But then to your point, you lose that game against a 3-win SEC team, and that really impacts your resume. So, it's again, this is where we get back to as long as every conference is kind of looking out for itself and doing its own thing, and the ACC and SEC are at 8, the Big 12 and the Big 10 are at 9, we're going to wind up with these conflicting scheduling philosophies. And then, and Chris again talked about this a little bit too, you're asking the selection committee to judge teams from different conferences that have been handed, markedly different paths to the college football playoff sort of, let's say, bubble. You're asking the committee to evaluate them the same way. It's a little bit more difficult.
Zach Osterman is our guest from the Indianapolis Star talking about Indiana football. Yesterday, Curt Cignetti talking to the media. I'm curious of this, Zach. A year ago, Curt Cignetti was, and I understand it. I totally get why. Curt Cignetti had a bravado about him and a confidence bordering on almost like an arrogance about him. Arrogance is probably the wrong word, but uber confident. And then everybody loved it because he backed it up. It was great. He backed it up. He backed it up at JMU. And I think Indiana needed that. A year ago, Indiana needed that. And truthfully, I thought that it got them to where they wanted to go. And then, and this is probably just me being over analytical, I thought he went to that well one too many times. I thought the comments on the college football game day on the field hours before the Indiana-Notre Dame game, even though that wouldn't have made its way into Notre Dame's locker room, but they didn't need it at that point. And he went to it. He spun that wheel one too many times, and it kind of blew up on him. Did he in any way, shape, or form appear to be different this year just because he's turned the program around? He's got them now. He's got them relevant. He doesn't need to be that guy per se, or is that just his nature?
No, it's a bit of both. Listen, and I have made this comparison going back, 12 months now. Again, and I'm not trying to cast myself as the expert on all things SEC football, but I grew up at the height of Steve Spurrier's Florida. Like that was the SEC program. That was the program that ran the SEC when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. And they are different personalities in some ways, but Steve Spurrier, Curt Cignetti, there needs, I think, always to be a little bit of that edge and a little bit of that sort of playful humor and a little bit of that, what we would call in more modern parlance, trash talking. And obviously the Spurrier ones are legendary. You can't spell Citrus Bowl without UT, and the books that weren't even colored in at the Auburn Library when it burned, and all these different things that we can go through. I don't know if Signetti's got quite that catalog of one-liners, but he does have, like, part of it will always just be his personality to be a little playful, to drop, that comment yesterday about we figured we'd just adopt an SEC scheduling philosophy. I think knowing full well before he said it what kind of reaction it was going to provoke. But I have said this to other people. I forget who first asked me this, but I said this to somebody a couple weeks ago where, in general, I don't think Cignetti has been quite as bullish and quite as quotable this year. And I think it is for the reason that you just outlined, which is I think a year ago, even if you rewind all the way back to the comments that he makes the night that he gets hired, Purdue sucks, and all this. I hope I'm allowed to say that on air. Forgive me.
You're quoting.
He said later that the reason he said that, the reason he kind of got fired up on the microphone the way he did, was because his first day on the job, he was walking around meeting different athletics officials, different people around the football program, different people in the department in the university, and everybody was just talking about, we'd love to go 6-6, we'd love to beat Purdue. And he was thinking that is completely the wrong mentality. That's not how I do things. We're not here to just be all right. We're not here to just sort of like meet minimum expectations. I've got to start resetting the way these people think about their football program. And from that point forward, you have the Google Me comment. There's some things that he says that in the spring season, there are a number of different comments from Big Ten Media Days, 2024, and then through the season all the way up to and including the comment that you talked about on game day at the Notre Dame game. I think that reflected Cignetti trying to, in his way, again, reflecting his personality and what works for him, trying to affect a sea change in the way that people inside and in the immediate orbit of his football program thought about that football program, what to expect from it, how to support it, what it was capable of, all of it. And I don't think he's sitting there thinking, oh, and now this year we're going to go 15-0 and win a national title and everything's fixed. But I think he steps back now, 12 months later, and I think he doesn't feel like he needs to be quite so intentional, that some of that, at least the basics of that culture change, have kind of taken root because of the success that people saw was possible when they sort of bought in, essentially. And so I think it has been noticeable to me this offseason. It's not like he's been dull and boring, but he hasn't had nearly as many of the sort of viral Cignetti moments that kind of became his calling card last season, became so much a part of the profile of the 2024 IU football season. He hasn't had nearly as many of those, and I don't think it's because he felt like he needed to tone them back. I think it's because he doesn't see the need for them this year in the way that he did last year.
A pre-conference schedule against opponents that went 11-25 last year: Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State. It begins for the Hoosiers August 30th against Old Dominion, and we can get between now and then more into some of the new faces you will see from a personnel standpoint with Zach Osterman. Zach, appreciate the time, the perspective today, and we will talk to you soon, all right?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, as always.
Zach Osterman joining us on the guest line here. Again, we're at Grand Park up in Westfield. To recap for you, practice number 1 for the Colts today. And I will reset this for you several times over the course of today. But, it was a 1-hour practice. It concluded just after 11 o'clock. Shane Steichen was optimistic afterwards. I guess you would expect him to be, just in terms of what he saw, the energy that he saw, and some of the things that they were working on. And I think what they were working on, and he made very specific mention of this on a number of occasions, and that is talking about the Colts, Shane Steichen made it clear that the one thing that he wants more than anything else to emphasize for this year in this camp for this particular group is that he thought a year ago they had too many games that they gave away late. And whether that be a focus issue, whether that be a scheme issue, whether that be a timing issue, those are the things that he feels need to be addressed and need to be worked on and fine-tuned. And so he made it very clear that throughout the course of their practices in this training camp, what he wants to do is have a little bit more of, and I'm going to use my own phrasing here, like an organized field chaos. And by that I mean the situations of late game situations where things are happening quickly, frantically. You got to make quick substitutions. You got to make a quick adjustment in terms of your scheme, be it defensively or offensively, and what you're trying to do. I think a year ago he felt like they lacked in that area, their focus or their attention to detail. They gave away games late. I think he feels like a year ago the Colts were the team that was always on the other end of Tyrese Halliburton's heroics, if you will. Like just watching and seeing, allowing for defeat to be snatched from the jaws of victory, and that they didn't make the plays down the stretch. So he mentioned today that one of the things he likes about Lou Anarumo's defense, for example, is that there are a lot of changes that can happen from the backside of the defense, in other words, the defensive backfield, forward in terms of schemes and different looks to keep the quarterbacks and those that are running the quarterback situation honest and to keep them kind of guessing as to what's going on and creating, if you will, those situations of having to think quickly, having to make quick decisions, having to have alteration to what you're doing almost become instinctive. And that was the thing that he wants to work on in this camp, and he felt like today they showed some moments of that. Now, Daniel Jones was the quarterback that worked with the starting unit as practice began. But you can't read into that a lot because between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, they essentially kind of split time at the starting position, and there was not necessarily one that stood out over the other, both in reps and in precision of reps. And so therefore, you can look at the fact that Daniel Jones threw an interception. You can look at the fact that Anthony Richardson had one ball that grossly oversailed Mo Alley Cox, but then they also had throws at times that were in rhythm and where they wanted to be. Both of them were taking their snaps underneath Bortolini, who it looks like is going to be the starting center. I don't think there's much question about that. Bortolini was the starting center from the get-go today and was throughout all of the reps of practice. And both quarterbacks, when they were back there, were throwing and were noticing that from the very get-go, the rookie Justin Wally was the one that was getting starting reps at the corner position over Jalen Jones and over Juju Brents. And Wally is somebody that Chris Ballard spoke of yesterday in a very favorable way, and it was very clear that he has been impressed by him. And still, it's one practice, but it is interesting that a young player like that immediately was getting that nod. And so that is something that I thought was interesting. Another thing that was interesting is a guy that I've always liked and I thought was a good player for the Colts. And, one of those that unfortunately health became probably an issue just in terms of overall availability and reliability. Julian Blackmon, it looks like now, is right on the cusp, if it hasn't happened yet today, apparently is in discussion to signing with the New Orleans Saints. I only mention that because he's one of those that you looked at and you go, oh, yeah. They bolstered that defensive backfield situation and wondered if maybe he wouldn't become like a late camp signing again just as an insurance policy, but it does look like he's going to end up in New Orleans. Camp tomorrow getting back underway at 10 o'clock. It will run until 11. Same for Friday, but Friday they will go until 11:15. So tomorrow and Friday in particular are important, and maybe it's important that they're doing the camp from 10 to 11 because it's obviously pretty hot out now. I mean, the air is pretty thick out here. Cam Blankenship, who's out here with me, just nodded. And that's the most movement he's had, actually, since we've been out here since 11 because it's a little stifling. It is definitely warm, but we're under shade of a tent, so not all a bad thing. Now, so far there have not been any strange things that have happened at Colts camp. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes stranger things happen out here. There are some stranger things that have happened in relation to the Indiana Fever, and I'm not talking about their loss last night against New York, but rather what you're going to see upcoming. And one of the representatives of the franchise will join us next to talk about exactly that. Adam Alexander, 2 o'clock. And last night I did something really cool last night. And a guy came up to me and said, hey, I appreciate that you're doing something really cool. And I said, you know what? It's so cool. I'd like to have you on tomorrow to talk about it. And he said, sounds good to me. And we're going to have that conversation at 2:30, and I'll let you know what it is when we come back here to Grand Park Colts Camp in Westfield. Query and Company on the Fan. I was mistaken, by the way. My apologies. Our guest from the Fever coming up in about 15 minutes from now. Last night, let me tell you something I did that is one of those things that was just, you kind of never know what it is going into it. And I felt bad for the planners of it because we've talked a lot about it, and I know that there was an expectation that didn't come to fruition. But I grew up with a good buddy of mine from, childhood growing up. My buddy Marshall lives in Colorado now and went to IU with us. We grew up together all the way through. And he came back into town along with his dad in order to see the TBT tournament. And he had bought tickets, a big block of tickets for the games at Hinkle in anticipation, as I think a lot of people anticipated, that IU and Butler and those alumni teams would be squaring off at Hinkle in the fun of that, of watching Yogi Ferrell and watching James Blackman Jr. and, taking on Shelvin Mack and all of that. And, of course, Indiana was out immediately. They literally they looked like the Simpsons gif. It was like walked in, walked right back out. And I think that did hurt the attendance at Hinkle. But there's still nothing like going to Hinkle Fieldhouse at sunset. And it harkens back to, for so many people, and I don't care what age range you are, whether you are my age or whether you're a younger person, whatever it might be, Hinkle is so magical and is so historical in general. But when the sun comes through the windows there and starts dancing around inside of Hinkle Fieldhouse, it's just, everything about it is awesome. And that's what took place last night as we went to the TBT game between Fail Harder, which is the team that upset Indiana and is made up of players from Central Indiana. Kyle Guy is, as they call it, the GM of that team, so he's the one that helps put it together. And then they were playing against, I believe Carmen's Crew is the name of the team, but it was essentially players from, now one would think Ohio State. William Buford was the only former Buckeye on the roster, but it's players that played collegiately throughout the state of Ohio and notably now play at the Shot Center in Columbus, just in terms of like summer league type stuff. And I didn't know a lot about this other than what we've talked about on the air, and we've obviously seen a lot of these games on cable television. It's a perfect summertime, thing to put together. They're smart in that regard because of the fact that it does just offer, like Marshall was saying. Marshall's like, yeah, I love it because it gives me something to watch in the non-NFL season coming off of the NBA, etc. And I know that there was obviously the plan and the hope for a bigger crowd or a bigger ticket sale based on those two teams advancing further. But Marshall had bought the tickets for the whole thing, so we went along with my buddy Byron last night, and going into Hinkle and being in that environment in itself was cool. But one of the things that was cool about it as well is they had up on the video board the game that was taking place in Wichita with the Wichita State alumni, and that crowd looked pretty good, with the Wichita State alumni team playing, and that was going to determine where the winner of last night's game went in advancing through this tournament. And, of course, the ultimate thing is the winning team gets $1 million to split amongst the team, the faculty, whatever you want to call it, throughout as well. Jared Solinger, who's been obviously a legend at Ohio State from a basketball standpoint, was involved on the sidelines for the Ohio team that played last night. They do what's it called, Eddie? Is it called the Elam scoring system? I think that's what it's called.
Ending?
The Elam ending. And we've heard about this, right? But to witness it was super cool, and let me explain. What happens is in the final 4 minutes of the game, they immediately go into the Elam ending. So the clock becomes irrelevant. They put a clock up for 95 minutes, and I thought, my goodness, there's no way it's going to take 95 minutes for this to happen, what I'm about to explain. But at the time, I believe the score was 62-46. The Fail Harder team, who has they have a really good player that played at Marion. They got a little guard that is from the area as well. Most of these guys are all from colleges around Central Indiana, and they played really, really well. But they were up 62-46 with 4 minutes remaining. So what then happens is you add 8 to the leading team's score. So the magic number becomes 70. So with 4 minutes left, it was, okay, first one to 70 wins. Well, you only have to score 8 points if you're the team that's leading, but the team from Ohio then had to score 24 points if they wanted to win at minimum, right? Because they needed the first one. Well, yeah, not at minimum. That's what they need. The first one to get to 70 would win the game. And it was fascinating because then the defensive intensity completely picked up, and the fail harder team had like 5 or 6 consecutive. They got to the point where they had scored their first 6 points. They hit 2 threes, I think it was. But they needed a basket to win, but the defensive intensity completely changed. And there's basically, you don't want to foul either because you don't want to put anybody on the free throw line and give them, free minutes. So there's strategy that comes into play with this. And the Ohio team went on this run where all of a sudden it was 68, I think like 62 or 64. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Like they're within a 3 here of basically being right on the cusp of then themselves being able to win this game. It was this incredible comeback, and the defensive intensity of that last 4 minutes, that alone made it worthwhile. I mean, it was super cool. It was great to be with the guys I grew up with. It was great to be at Hinkle, and it was great to see guys that were playing really for just this incredible passion and also just for the kind of the thrill of playing the game. Lance Stevenson was there and was going absolutely bonkers on every single play, which is kind of what Lance Stevenson does. Even got some air guitar out of it, which was cool. We're going to talk to one of the vice presidents of the Indiana Fever, associate vice president of marketing, as a matter of fact, but that's because stranger things are happening at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. We'll explain next. In fact, you just heard that mention of the Fever and Stranger Things at Gainbridge Fieldhouse with Las Vegas tomorrow night. Joining us now on the guest line to talk about that and more, she is the Associate Vice President of Marketing for the Indiana Fever. Shayna Sangster joining us on the program. Shayna, let's begin with this. I'll be honest. You know, sometimes you look at something and you go, wow, this is super cool, and then you remind yourself, but it feels familiar. What we're going to see tomorrow night took place also in 2021, but that's not to say that that has denied any sort of the buzz about what's taking place with the Fever, because people are excited about this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, I just want to say thank you so much for having me, and we're so excited. I'm so excited to be on with the flagship or our broadcast for the Fever. So thank you so much. We hear so many fans who just love and enjoy the broadcast, so we appreciate you guys. And then second, yes, this is the second go around for these jerseys. We launched them originally in 2021 and decided to bring them back in celebration of first the finale of the series that happens later this year. And then also just because the first go around, we didn't have much in stock. We didn't have the inventory available, and we knew our fans kept asking for them. Our players were asking for a black jersey. And so we just knew like this was the right time.
Let me ask you this in terms of the design, and I'm going to sound, and I apologize for asking this and showing my naivete here, because I can't recall. These are the exact same, basically, by design as what we saw in 2021 or new, because the color aspect of it, obviously you tie in with Stranger Things, and we'll get to how that came about, but the look of it itself is super cool.
Yeah, they are the exact same from 2021. Actually, when we decided to do this about a year ago, they went directly to print. There was no time to make changes. We had to kind of roll with it. And so Nike took it and started creating the jerseys immediately. They have their black jerseys with red particles. If you've seen the show, you know that there's these particles that float in the air, and so that's representative of that. And then the main character from the show is named 11. She's the female lead. She's powerful. She kind of resembles, what we think of our players on the court. And there's a number 11 on the belt buckle. And then on the back, there's Fever turned upside down in representation of the upside down, which is also from the show.
Now, obviously, the show itself, Shayna, takes place fictionally in the state of Indiana, thus the tie-in. I get it, with Stranger Things and the Fever. But where was the first outreach, I guess, or the first connection made in being able to put this partnership together with something that is a Netflix property?
Yeah, it was back in 21. At that point in time, the league launched league-wide. All the teams got new jerseys, 3 new jerseys. And Nike came to us with the idea of partnering with Stranger Things for this. And me being a fan of the show, I was just so excited because it was an opportunity to kind of mesh 2 worlds. And I think it also allows us to tap into pop culture in a way that we don't always get a chance to do. And so it started there. Nike brought the idea, and then we collaborated on the uniform design, and then brought Netflix into it, and they were excited. So it's been a partnership ever since.
Shayna, how have you had to, as the Associate Vice President of Marketing for the Indiana Fever, and, with that, this is a good challenge to have, but has it been somewhat of a challenge to the fact that you now have the most marketable player in arguably all of women's sports in the United States as part of your brand, but at the same time, she is part of the bigger picture and totality of the team itself. Has it been a challenge to kind of balance the marketing of individual and team?
For sure. We are all about team here. We think it obviously takes all 12 players to make up this team, or 11 players as we have, or 12. We just actually signed someone to a 10-day contract this week. But there's going to be a star. And this is, if there's a problem, it's a good problem to have. She is a phenomenal player, a phenomenal human being. And she makes me look good because my marketing has never looked better, honestly. And it's not anything that I'm doing differently. It's because we have a rock star player and front office and starters on this team that really go out there and give it their all and make us at the office look great.
And in terms of that, one of the things that I think is so interesting, and we knew this, we anticipated this going into it, Shayna Sangster, but when walk around downtown. You know, our building is right on Monument Circle, and a lot of times on a game day, I'll walk around. Well, just for example, I'll give you a good example, Shayna. A couple of weeks ago, I'm out on Monument Circle, and I see this young family, and, you know, you always do the thing where you're like, they were trying to take a picture, and so I'm like, hey, do you guys want me to take the photo of all of you? Oh, yeah, great. So then I ask, so, you know, where are you guys from? What brings you to town? And the dad says to me, well, our daughter here, it's her 10th birthday. We're from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but we always do a trip for each of our kids' birthday. And her trip this year was she wanted to come see Caitlin Clark play. So you have this aspect of it is a national brand, right? It's a national brand, and you understand that. But at the same time, you're wanting them to know that it's the Indiana Fever. And to me, that dichotomy, if you will, I would think it would be challenging.
It certainly is, but honestly, it's a good thing, right? They come here for Caitlin, but we have seen so many of them say they stay here for Kelsey Mitchell. They stay for Aaliyah Boston. They get to love the equity of or get to love every single player on the roster, and that has been a phenomenal spillover. And so, you know, as the lead for marketing, what I really try and do is make sure that when I'm putting Caitlin on a billboard or on a piece of signage, that we're partnering her with a lesser-known player so we can kind of allow her equity to spill over into everyone else. And she's not only raised that for the other players on the team, but also for the Fever brand itself. Our awareness of this team and of this brand has never been higher. And so I appreciate it. I don't mind when they come for her because they leave knowing everybody else.
Now here's what's interesting. So the Fever, obviously we know that, you know, Stephanie White, great player at Purdue, Caitlin Clark, great player at Iowa. You're a Spartan, is that correct, if we're staying within the Big Ten theme?
Actually, everyone thinks I'm a Spartan because I grew up in Lansing, Michigan. I'm a huge Michigan State fan because you can't grow up next to campus and not be. But I actually went to Western Michigan. I'm a Bronco.
Okay, so you're a Bronco. You rode the boat with PJ Fleck. All right, that's cool when he was back there. Okay. And Joe Wrights was a Bronco as well. Okay, so you are at heart a Spartan, but my understanding is this, okay? Now, it's very important, Shayna, as you know. You're the Associate Vice President of Marketing, right? And I have no title whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I'm not really sure that I have a job. But my job is to be the Associate Director of Research when I'm conducting an interview. My research tells me that you were born inside of a Michigan hospital that has produced 4 Michigan legends, and you're one of them. Who are the other 3?
Well, that would be in Saginaw, Michigan, and the others are Draymond Green, Stevie Wonder, and Serena Williams. I knew Stevie Wonder was
nice. So Serena Williams, that's the one that would be the curveball. Most people would have guessed, I would think, that Serena was born in Southern California because didn't they move there shortly thereafter?
Yeah, I believe so. I know she definitely grew up in Compton, but was born in Saginaw, Michigan kind of randomly. So I always like to claim that's my claim to fame.
Now, let me give you this. Let me throw this one at you. So Stevie Wonder was born in Saginaw. As a young, you know, obviously once it was obvious he was going to be a prolific musician, he moved to Detroit and got involved in Motown. When I was in Detroit about 3 or 4 years ago, I went to go see Stevie Wonder's childhood home. I thought, well, it'd be cool to see Stevie Wonder's childhood home, not far from Motown, where the Motown, you know, studio is. So I go there, and I'm looking at his childhood home, and the guy next door, super nice dude, came out, and he's like, yeah, I actually grew up in this house. This was my mom's house. Unfortunately, my mom passed, but I now have the house. Okay, that's cool. And he was about the same age as Stevie Wonder. Now, he told me, he swears to me that when he was like 10 years old, before he moved, he saw Stevie Wonder riding a bike around the neighborhood. Now, you think that's fact or fiction? If we're doing Stranger Things, Stevie Wonder riding his bike after being born in Saginaw, fact or fiction? What do you think?
I don't know. I feel like that might be fiction. I actually, many people don't know this, but my mom went on a blind date, and I don't mean this as a joke. It was literally a blind date with Stevie Wonder when she was living in Michigan, and he definitely was blind. So I don't know if he was riding a bike. I just can't.
Was he cool? Did he serenade her? Do we know?
I didn't. I've never asked that. You know, I will definitely ask that when we get off the call.
Do you know if he's ever called just to say he loves her? I mean, you know, you're curious, right?
No,
for what it's worth, I would
married.
put you. Listen, Shayna, let me tell you something. Well, obviously, Shayna Sangster. Now, here's the thing. As the Associate Vice President of Marketing, I will tell you this, okay? Stevie Wonder, pretty darn cool. No question about it. Serena Williams, arguably the greatest female athlete of all time. No question. I slot you in front of Draymond Green. You are number 3 of the 4, for what that's worth. Is that cool?
That.
Yeah, no problem.
I'll take it. I will take it.
You know? All right, Stranger Things jerseys for the Fever coming up against the Las Vegas Aces. There are going to be other games as well, as a matter of fact, where these are going to be seen. But it all gets underway again tomorrow night against the Aces. You can hear that game right here on this radio station. Eddie Garrison you will hear on the pre- and post-game. Shane, I appreciate it as always, and go Broncos, okay?
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right, the pride of Saginaw, Shayna Sangster joining us on the guest line. All right, a lot to get to still. Adam Alexander will be on the television call for the Brickyard 400 coming up on Sunday. He also a product here of Indianapolis, and we will talk to Adam coming up 2 o'clock, just about a couple minutes from now. Cam Blankenship is the on-site engineer. We are here at Colts camp. Grand Park in Westfield, where the Colts wrapped up practice number 1 just after 11 o'clock today. Now the only activity on the field is that of a John Deere that's running around and getting everything ready for tomorrow. You might hear that just off in the distance. We are just off to the sidelines here. On a very warm day in central Indiana, it will be a warm day, one would assume, with track activity coming up this weekend at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Sunday, the running of the Brickyard 400. And that, from a television standpoint, will be anchored by Adam Alexander, who has done the Brickyard before from a radio standpoint, joins us now on the guest line. And, Adam, I actually had Eddie Garrison play Pray by MC Hammer coming back because you probably don't remember this, but I think we were juniors in high school when I gave you the MC Hammer tape, and you broke into a spontaneous version of that song with your excitement and giddiness over me giving you an MC Hammer cassette tape. And so I thought, you know what, can you do a little MC Hammer Pray for me real quick?
I was going to say there's a 0% chance that's going to happen today, Jake. And I would also say I'm highly offended. I would say I'm highly offended that you come on the air and you say, hey, we're over here on the sidelines. I thought maybe that was a shot at me because that's where I spent most of my time playing high school football at North Central, on the sidelines.
Hey, Adam, here's the thing. So for those that don't know, Adam Alexander and I we met. If you can remember this, Adam, I'll give you a shiny, brand new $50 bill just like Bozo the Clown used to give out. Do you know what class we were in when we first met, by the way?
It was English, right? Like freshman year English, is that right?
Sophomore year English. Miss Martin, she was like 24. She was hot. You remember Miss Martin by chance?
I have no comments on that. I don't recall.
So you were wearing a Purdue shirt, and I was like, well, who's this guy? This loudmouth, the Purdue fan, and I was an IU fan, and we both knew that we wanted to get into broadcasting. And then, as fate would have it, junior year at WJEL at North Central, we were very fortunate, Adam, that they had a radio television program, and you and I were in that, and Mac Engel was in there with us as well, Chris Love, David Woods, who I work with now, a lot of folks, but we were very, very fortunate. And without getting too, boring people with, us being the two old guys from the Muppets here, it truly was a special time because you and I immediately just hooked up and said, you know what, and we were the best of buds from the get-go, and that continues to today. But, man, it was a special time. A lot of fun back then.
It really is amazing that it all worked out like it did. And I was talking to some folks yesterday about coming back to Indy and doing the Brickyard 400, and they asked, what's it like to do that race in your hometown? And I said, this is truly full circle because our broadcasting careers began, right there at North Central and J. Everett Light Career Center and WJEL. So to be able to start there and do all the things that we were able to do at such a young age and now to be back is cool. And obviously you're a part of the sports landscape every day in Indianapolis, and all you do for the community is amazing. And I know for you the foundation laid right there. And so it's got to be great for you to be able to be around like you are and share so many great moments with the city of Indianapolis and the sports community.
Do you remember, Adam, before we get to the Brickyard, because there are some storylines to talk about with that, but do you remember, and I think it's hard for people now to understand what a thrill this was for us then, but you and I, when we were juniors, and I take a lot of pride in this, Adam, honestly, and I know your career has gone on to great things. I mean, you're the television voice of NASCAR for the Brickyard 400 upcoming on TNT, also on those races that take place on Prime, and, you have done a number of different broadcasts in college football as well. But I don't know, Adam, that anything can eclipse the moment of joy and pride that I had and the excitement, maybe even the nervousness of the fact that I believe that you and I, if I can pat ourselves on the back, I guess, but I think we were the first two students ever from a high school broadcast standpoint to be granted credentials to broadcast live the Indiana-Kentucky basketball all-star game. Back when it was a sellout at Market Square, Eric Montross and Damon Bailey were the top two players. Dwayne Morton was for Kentucky. But we just took it upon ourselves to apply for a credential, and it was kind of a waiting process of whether or not they were going to let these two knuckleheads from North Central do it. But do you remember, Adam, what a thrill that was for us and just how, at the time, how honored we were to be able to do that broadcast and what it meant for our level of excitement to broadcast that game?
Well, I think, Jake, it just speaks to the passion that we have for what we do. And that's why you're still doing it today and I'm still doing it today. and that is we just love showing up and going to work and, being in the moment when it comes to live sports, whether, radio, TV, whatever it is. And, back then, our energy level was so high for it, you couldn't hold us back, and we just wanted more and more. And so after getting to spend, an entire season doing North Central basketball, which in and of itself was a great honor because of the schedule we played and the great gyms we got to go to across the entire state of Indiana, that just wasn't enough for us. And so when it rolled around and in June it was time for the Indiana-Kentucky All-Star game, we wanted to be a part of that. So, I just think it speaks to the passion that you and I both have for this. We had it then at 16, 17 years old, and we still have it today now that we're in our 50s.
Yeah, so this race coming up this weekend, Adam, and I know that, what it will mean for you to be back home and be at, in my opinion, the greatest racetrack in the world, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But let's get into some of the storylines because, with this particular race and the fact that it was moved, obviously, to the road course for a number of years, they're now back on the oval. That, obviously, a year ago was the return. But this particular track and the challenges that it presents to these drivers, what makes, aside from the history, Indianapolis different?
I would just say the nostalgia, and you mentioned history, but for me, and I was talking to Dale Jr. about this yesterday. He'll be a part of our coverage Sunday on TNT. Outside of Daytona, this is one I think a lot of drivers circle as a place you want to win just because how winners at Indianapolis are celebrated. And it really, the Indy 500 is the Indy 500. But it really, if you're a racer, you want to win there. And I think about those that did it in Formula One and how Michael Schumacher is still celebrated today, having won it, 5 times, and what Jeff Gordon, what his name means, not just because of what he's done in the history of NASCAR and the championships and all that he's accomplished, but the 5 wins at Indianapolis are something that is right there at the top of his resume just because of the magnitude of winning at that place. And I know a lot of drivers were disappointed. When it went to the road course, they understood that move and the timing of it and all of that, but it took away an opportunity for them to win one of the crown jewels in NASCAR because the Brickyard 400 was not on the schedule. And I know Denny Hamlin, for one, he won last week. He's on a roll right now. He's been close at Indy. He's never won. And I know he feels like at 44 years old, how many more opportunities am I going to have? I had 3 opportunities that went away when we were on a road course. I feel like I need to go get it done right now. And so there's a lot of drivers that feel that urgency that are on the backside of their career. If they haven't won it, they want to get it done to say they won at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the oval.
Adam, on Sunday, I don't think, and I don't want to mention, weather-wise, if the forecast doesn't look great. It doesn't look terrible. I think it's a small chance of some precipitation, but I do think the air is, even if it doesn't rain, it's going to be humid. It's going to be thick. How does that impact? I know from an IndyCar standpoint, a thick air like that can kind of slow those engines down. They kind of slog through that thick air. The grip can become challenged if it gets too hot on the track. But what about from a Cup standpoint? How does it impact the cars themselves and maybe even the strategy of a long race like that?
Well, strategy is going to be a big part of the equation. And if any way, shape, or form, the weather impacts the handling of the cars, whether that be the track conditions themselves or just what it does to bog down the engine or change the way you race, if it has an impact on strategy, that's a big deal because this is a strategy race. And we see that, in the Indy 500 too. But in NASCAR, it's so challenging to pass here. You get the restarts, and that's where there's a lot of excitement. But then once you find yourself in position, it comes down to when are you going to pit? How many stops are you going to make? How can you minimize your time on pit road? And is it better to pit 3 times but have to wait on fuel, or is it better to pit 4 times and have quicker stops? And then when are these cautions going to come out? We know when we'll get 2 of them at the end of the stages, but when will there be other cautions? And so it's a lot to manage for these teams. And you talk about weather. We're coming off one of our hottest races. It was not good, Sunday in Dover. It was hot and humid and very hard on these drivers, and I would anticipate it will be more of the same Sunday in Indy for sure.
Dover was one. Adam Alexander is our guest. You can see him and hear him Sunday on TNT for the coverage of the Brickyard 400. In terms of that race in Dover, nobody, I guess, if you were to look at it coming off of that, would be hotter than Denny Hamlin because he won that race, and he's put together a couple of wins this year. Do you believe, Adam, in momentum when it comes to racing, or are the tracks so different one to the next that it's kind of hard to judge?
No, I do believe in momentum, and I think it's top to bottom within the team. Certainly a driver maybe has a little bit more, swagger about themselves if they've won, and I saw that in Denny Hamlin. I felt like after he won at Dover and the way he won, he was energized. But I also feel like that, that crew plays such a big role, and they feel the momentum and the expectations of winning. And, from a crew chief standpoint, as you align strategy, when you've won races, it builds a little bit of an insurance policy once you get to the playoffs, and that opens the door, for the risk you can take once you're in a race, especially when you're going to a venue where, as we said, strategy is going to be a big deal. So I feel like, momentum is something that is real and that could play a factor. It's different than other sports, but certainly it's something that's a part of the equation.
By the way, Adam, speaking of swagger, we double dated for grad dance, and we took our dates for pizza. Do you remember that? I mean, that's some swagger, isn't it?
I guess it is. I'm sure I wasn't thinking that at the time. It was probably more of a budget decision, but since we're 52 now, let's just go with swagger. I think that's much better.
Yeah. Well, listen, a lot of people don't realize this, and maybe you don't want me – I mean, I'll say it like on the air here. Speaking of swagger, so maybe we didn't have it in high school, but by the time you were – early to mid-20s, you had some swagger because I was there the night that you and Audrey, your wife, met. So, like, you had natural swagger, right? I mean, I wasn't even a wingman, right?
Well, and that was like, 30 years ago or whatever that was, over 30 years ago. So it's all worked out. We're still together. I don't know what that says about her,
You had some swagger, though, man.
Yeah, I guess so.
Down in Evansville. All right,
That's
Adam,
right.
I want to go back to just in talking about this race in general. And, we talked about Denny Hamlin. Obviously, Kyle Larson knows his way around this track as well. But is there somebody that you look at and you think to yourself, you know what? I feel like this driver might be just kind of like that caged animal that's about to break out. Things haven't gone their way, but just with the right break here or there, their year could look totally different. Who jumps out at you in that capacity or description?
In that category, it's Tyler Reddick. He started on the pole last year in this race. He ended up finishing second, and he was the regular season champion last year. They haven't won this year. They're pretty much a lock for the playoffs. He's got an enormous advantage over the cut line. That's not going to deteriorate. I don't think we're going to get, 5 more winners before the end of the regular season. So he's going to be a part of the playoffs, but they haven't won. And when you haven't won, it eats at you. And we know what he's capable of as a driver. He actually won one of those races on the road course at Indianapolis when we were racing there. But he's not done it in the Brickyard. His 2 starts there on the oval, top 10, and that runner-up finish I mentioned a year ago, that's a team that I feel like if they could get it going, could make it happen. And, and his teammate Bubba Wallace is another driver to watch. Bubba's had, sneaky good numbers at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And I feel like that, they could have cars this weekend that could compete. Qualifying is going to be big because that pit road's tough, and you want track position, and then you also want a good pit stall selection. So that'll be big for those 2 drivers. But those are 2 to watch for sure when you talk about drivers that haven't won yet, that need to get something going and could, jumpstart their season on Sunday.
And with that, when you talk about just track position in general, Adam Alexander, our guest here, joining us. Colts campus, where I'm located here in Grand Park in Westfield, and Adam will be on the call for the Brickyard 400 coming up Sunday. There's always that narrative, Adam, that the track, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, that the width of those cars, it's a difficult passing track. Do you buy into that? And, is there a particular driver that you look at and you go, you know what, you could say that, but that driver's figured out where to kind of cut those corners and make areas passing zones that others may not want to go into?
Well, there's no doubt that is a big deal at Indy, and it's very challenging for the drivers to pass there, and that's been a topic of conversation really since we went there for the first time, way back in the mid-'90s. But I would say that, a couple of drivers that I would put on that list, Kyle Larson is one, and, he won this race last year, and he just seems to adapt. And they had been on a little bit of a summertime slump. But he seemed to come out of that. Last week at Dover, didn't win, but did some very Kyle Larson-like things last week. And so my expectations for him are high this weekend. He's running the Saturday race and the Sunday race, so that extra track time probably will help him as well. And someone else I think we need to be talking about is Chase Briscoe. We know Indiana drivers have had success in the Brickyard 400. We talk about Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, Ryan Newman. Chase Briscoe won at Pocono. If you were to say what track on the schedule is like Indy, the one that is closest is Pocono, and it just feels like a lot is aligning right now. That team is running well, second the last 2 weeks. I would keep my eye on Chase Briscoe this weekend.
Doesn't Pocono, Adam, and I might be thinking of Ontario back when it was still around, but I thought it was Pocono that when it was designed has one corner, like one is exactly as Trenton was, one is I think Ontario, and doesn't it have, I think it's turn 3 in Pocono is 9 degrees 12 minutes and is specified to resemble the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Did I just make that up, or am I remembering that correctly?
Nope, you're right, and it's Trenton, which how you pulled Trenton, New Jersey out is amazing. That speaks to your weird brain. But yes, it's Trenton, it's Indianapolis, and turn 2 the tunnel turn, and then turn 3 modeled after the Milwaukee Mile. But yeah,
Milwaukee,
there are characteristics that pass over for sure.
Okay, speaking of my weird brain, before we let you go, Adam Alexander, you know I have to play this. I've done it with Mac as well. So I remember I still have like 2 tapes of when we did the short-lived Jake and Adam show on WJEL in high school. Now, I got fired from that show. Remember, I got in trouble and got suspended, and I know that's shocking to people. That then you had to do the rest of the year by yourself, right? Isn't that how that worked out?
I feel like that's how it was, yeah.
Yeah. So one night, though, we're doing this show, and, we had done like 3 of them, and we already had run out of stuff to talk about. So we didn't know what to do. And our buddy Jason Venturi, whose dad, Rick Venturi, of course, part of the Colts family, and Jason Venturi had a new keyboard. He was a musician, and his keyboard had some sound effect that sounded kind of like race cars. So we decided one night on the Jake and Adam show that instead of the show itself, we would just do a 2-hour ad-lib, totally fake, made up, off the top of our head, Indy 500. We had a crash on lap 5 with somebody that I think ended up actually coming back and finishing 3rd, which was miraculous. But anyway, so Eddie's got it queued up. Here is, Adam, the last, I think, lap and a half, or the last lap of the always exciting 1990 or 1991, thereabout, Fantasy Indy 500. This is Adam Alexander, myself, Mac Engel, Chris Love was on the broadcast as well, Jason Venturi on the keyboards. Here we go.
Trying to make his move. It's Mears. He can't do it. Not enough room. Michael Andretti is working hard on Rick Mears right now. He is working hard as Mears' engine begins to smoke. Michael Andretti has passed Rick Mears for second. Eddie Cheever now has taken over 2 guys. He has gotten past Foyt and Sullivan. And the young rookie has moved up and now is in 5th position as it's Al Sr., Michael Andretti, Rick Mears, Brian Dyke, and then Eddie Cheever.
Just as Cheever takes Sullivan, Sullivan takes Cheever right back. Eddie Sullivan, the great driver of the beautiful red white car, has just dropped back into 8th place. Mac, you've got the race coming up.
Holy cow! Cheever and Foyt are out! Foyt collides with Cheever all the way, coming into turn 3.
Now, needless to say, Adam, Matt got overly excited, right?
He did. He was in his moment there.
Now, you were able to call in the Danny Sullivan red and white beautiful car, which is also a pretty good recall, right?
There you go. I didn't remember that. I remember doing that, and I got to say, like, when you think about, and I said earlier, the passion we have for this, that right there illustrates what it meant to us. We just couldn't get enough. And, to come in that night and do that, and that's pretty cool to pull that tape up when you think about where we are and what we're doing now.
Well, and in particular how bad we were, but it was fun. And, I think it also speaks to our swagger, Adam, because needless to say, me, you, and Mac were just absolutely lady killers back then by broadcasting
no doubt.
Fake Indy 500, right?
That's right. Yeah. Well, when you do that with your evenings, it speaks to what your social life is all about in high school.
That's exactly right. We had a ton of fun, though. I will say that. All right, Mac, the schedule of events in terms of everything taking place at IMS this weekend, and in particular your coverage and when it all gets underway.
Yeah, so we'll have practice on Friday for both the Xfinity and Cup Series, and on the Cup side, that'll be on True TV. I think we're on the air at 1 o'clock Eastern time there at the track on Friday. And then on Saturday, we've got qualifying for the Brickyard 400. We'll have the CW coverage for the NASCAR Xfinity race. I think we're on the air 4 o'clock Eastern time with that event late Saturday afternoon. And then Sunday, NASCAR on TNT, NASCAR Nation on the air at 1 o'clock, getting you ready for the Brickyard 400. And we'll be green shortly after 2 from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And I'm hoping that the rain stays away, because I'm going to hang a day and come out the Colts camp on Monday. That's my plan anyway. So I'm hoping it all works out.
Bring your Speedo. It's warm here. Not that it's not
Yeah,
North Carolina,
no
but
doubt.
it's warm here. You know?
That's right.
So there you go.
Right.
All right, Adam, hey, obviously say hello to your dad. Say hello to Audra for me as well. And hopefully we'll see you this weekend. I'm doing IndyCar in Monterey, but also we'll be around Monday as well. So probably we'll see you over the course of the weekend. But appreciate the time. All right, travel safe.
Thanks so much, Jake. You guys have a good one.
All right, Adam Alexander joining us on the program. Again, TNT coming up on Sunday, and then, as he mentioned, CW for the Xfinity race as well, the Pennzoil 250. I mentioned last night that I was out at Hinkle, and, Adam and I actually, some of those games, we had a lot of fun. And I remember when North Central got beat in 91, we were doing, radio for North Central. They got beat by Southport. And I can still recall, my memory is weird. I mean, I admit, it's kind of bizarre, but and I always felt bad about this. There was a kid for Southport, I believe his name was Dan Von Dilligan, and we called him Dan Von Dellini. For some reason, we had his name. We just didn't know the correct pronunciation of his name. So if anybody out there is from Southport and knows Dan Von Dilligan, if he's still in the area, please apologize that we called him Dan Von Dellini for like 2 years in basketball. But I could still remember that team from Southport. William Moore was on that team. William Moore actually was when I was a junior. My senior year, it would have been George Hemphill was a really good player. Shaka Lands was a really good player. Dan Von Dilligan was good. Brad Courtney was a big man that was a good player. And their anchor that was really good, and I thought one of the most underappreciated high school basketball players of the area, was Marlon Fleming. And he was like 6'4", 235, lightning quick on his feet. But those games at Hinkle were so much fun and so much magic for us. And it was such a thrill, which is why last night when I was at Hinkle, nostalgically as it is any time you walk into that venue, it is super cool. And I was thrilled to be there. And the guy that helped put it all together last night and made it possible for me and others to be able to watch basketball at Hinkle in July came up to say hi. And I said, you know what, I'd love to get you on the show because I love the brainstorm of this idea from 12 years ago and what it's turned into today. He put together the TBT. It came through Hinkle last night, and Dan Friel joins us next. I mentioned last night, and by the way, we will get you caught up to speed on everything that took place this morning. It's been some 3 hours since practice wrapped up here for the Colts. There were 2 items of note in terms of players that were getting reps at the starting position and reps throughout the course of the first practice for 2025. I will let you know what that is coming up about 15 minutes from now, but I wanted to revisit what I was talking about from last night. My buddy Marshall lives in Colorado and just started following the TBT basketball tournament because he loved the fact that it gave him sports viewing option in the summertime. So he got really into it, started watching it, was excited about the fact that Indiana and Butler both had teams in it, and bought tickets for the activity at Hinkle Fieldhouse. And last night we went and watched it. And even though it was not the teams of our rooting interest per se, it was a super fun game. And a lot of that because of the Elam ending, which we will talk about with a gentleman who, as I was sitting watching the game last night, came up and was nice enough to make his introduction. And I said, you know what? I totally appreciate you coming up and saying hi, and I'd like to know more about the development of this league and this tournament. We'll call it a tournament for more so than a league. Dan Field joins me now on the program. He is in New Orleans. He is a co-founder and I believe CEO. Now, you tell me, Dan, if I have that title correct in terms of the TBT, but if not, then I'm giving it to you. CEO and co-founder of the league. Does that sound good?
I'll take co-founder. CEO is probably my buddy John, but co-founder, general counsel. I've probably worn every hat that we have at some point over the 12 years that we've been doing this, Jake. But really appreciate you having me on and talking TBT for sure.
Well, I want to go back to this because, just in talking to you last night, I could tell right away. I'm like, I'd like to know more about this, and that is, this tournament, which I think people are becoming more and more familiar with it. Partially because of the advantage of it taking place in the summertime. I think that's very smart strategically and obviously schedule-wise works out for the athletes. But take me through the genesis, a decade plus 2 ago of how this all came about and whether or not you ever envisioned it being at the level it is today.
Honestly, I think we knew it would be popular, but it wasn't like we were trying to create a business idea, Jake. It was just 2 buddies that, I've known John since we were 12, John Mugar. And it was sort of like the modern day equivalent of 2 guys sitting around a bar and talking about sports and what you would do differently if you could start it from scratch. And it just started over text and email. And that kind of continued for about a year and a half. We were both working in totally different careers, not working in sports at all. But we were huge sports fans and, former college athletes. And we definitely knew sports pretty well, we thought. And the more we started emailing and texting and kind of coming up with this idea, the more we honed in on the concept of TBT, and it has become, kind of hopefully a staple in the summer that, certainly hardcore basketball fans know about, they watch, they really enjoy, and I think we're really starting to break through with, sort of just casual fans as well. It's an event that has some unique elements to it. It's got a lot of passion, and you're probably, as you saw last night, it's got the most unique ending, I think, in all the sports with the Elam ending.
Well, the Elam ending is fascinating because, and for those that are unfamiliar, what that means is this. Last night, with 4 minutes to go in the game, it was a 62-46 score. And Fail Harder, which is a team of predominantly Indiana-based players, was up 16 on a team from predominantly Ohio-based players. But the magic number with the Elam ending becomes 8 points higher than whatever the lead score is. So with 4 minutes left, you kind of reset everything, and it's, okay, first to 70 wins the game. What was fascinating about it to me, Dan, was the defensive intensity and somewhat the strategy that then changed. And the way Ohio was able to then go on a little mini run, and now all of a sudden they've made a run where it's like 66-62, and that, the one team needs 4 more points, but the other is on a serious push here, and then it becomes really kind of tense, right? I mean, it was like everybody's kind of clutching their knuckles as Fail Harder's trying to get that elusive last 2 baskets, which they ended up getting and advancing. But that strategy of it, to me, completely changed the tone of that game in the last 4 minutes, which was cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's a game last night, the one that you saw, that if it's a standard ending to a basketball game, it's just at the best case scenario is that it becomes a free throw fest. And then maybe the Carmen's Crew Ohio team has an opportunity to get it within a few points, maybe. But realistically, it's probably just going to get played out and the game is over. But because the Elam ending requires you to play to that target score, which last night was 70, both of those teams have a chance. It's sort of like baseball where you're not, as Yogi Berra said, it ain't over till it's over. That's definitely true with the Elam ending. So that Carmen's Crew team, the team from Ohio, they basically just got about 5, 6, 7, 8 stops in a row defensively. And then every time that they came down the court, they scored. So they got the game close. Like you said, 66-62, I think, was where it got at its closest point. And you could feel the intensity. Everybody's on their feet anticipating that final basket. Everybody in the stands was excited about it. And Carmen's crew made it interesting towards the end. Now, obviously, like there's sometimes where that team that's behind has a chance to actually win it, and they do win it. And when that happens, it's just pandemonium. And that happens, more often than it would otherwise, for sure.
Listen, the last 4 minutes of that game, Dan, I mean, it was like a light switch went off in terms of the intensity of it, right? Especially defensively, which was cool. And then you got Lance Stevenson going crazy on every basket. I mean, it was fun. It was a great environment. And I thought, and this is what I wanted to touch on, and I guess I want to thank you for this. And maybe this was by design. You're happy to have, you want obviously anybody to enjoy the TBT. But I thought it was kind of symbolic of what you walked up on, and that was 3 guys that grew up together, that grew up playing basketball. We played 21 and knockout and all that in the driveway, and we're at 3 different places. And we're all the same age, but living, Marshall living elsewhere and coming back, and just being able to go and sit and tell old war stories and watch basketball and watch guys that are still being able to play at a high level, but not doing so necessarily for the school that they once played for. I thought it was perfectly symbolic, and I'm curious if that was kind of the envision of what you had in mind 12 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like your story, Jake's real similar to mine and John's. We were living in 2 different cities, and we've been friends since we were 12. We grew up playing wiffle ball and basketball and, air hockey and everything else that teenage boys do. And I think so often, as men, like we get into adulthood and those opportunities to kind of congregate, get together, have disappeared. And so what we really wanted to do with TBT was bring back something that's enjoyable, that's fun, that is intense. Like when you go to a TBT game, you're seeing the best that the players have in terms of stopping the other team. There's actual defense being played. The only team that wins the money at the end of this tournament is the team that wins it. And so the result of that is that you're getting to see the type of basketball, the type of sporting event that you remember, from the 80s or the 90s. I remember watching the Celtics all throughout the 80s. We grew up in Boston, John and I did. And what we're trying to encourage is that type of play. Every possession matters. And I think whether you're a casual fan or you're somebody like you, Jake, that does this for a living, or Lance Stevenson that is an NBA veteran, you can go to these games, watch these games on TV, and get excited about what's happening because it's something that is so natural to the human psyche to want to experience and view people competing at the highest possible intensity that they have.
So you had it at Hinkle. The teams that were coming into Hinkle, I mean, obviously, we talked about this, and I mentioned it earlier on the show. I mean, Indiana and Butler having alumni teams and getting bounced early probably does hurt at gate a little bit, I realize. But the travel and the things that go into making it possible for these teams, like fail harder now. I know last night we were talking about where they advance in this tournament, and they were waiting to see what happened in Wichita last night. But in terms of the advance of the tournament, you start out with how many teams and who is funding for the travel of these teams throughout the tournament that culminates where? So 3 questions.
Yeah, it's 64 teams. It's basically like what March Madness is set up. It's a single elimination tournament, 64 teams. We had 8 locations all around the country. And within those 8 locations, you've got 8 teams in each spot, and they play down to one sort of regional champion. This year, what we're doing is we have essentially home court advantage. Each of the regionals that we play in has usually an alumni team that is the sort of anchor tenant, if you're talking about what a mall would look like. So in Kentucky in Lexington there, we had the University of Kentucky alumni team. And in Louisville, we had a U of L alumni team. And obviously in Indianapolis, we had 2. We were blessed to have 2. We had the Butler alumni team in Indiana. What will happen now is that this fail harder team that is now the regional champion in Indianapolis, they're going to travel out to Wichita. They're going to play the regional champion from Syracuse, which will be crowned tonight. Up there, we've got a UConn alumni team that advanced to the 3rd round, as well as a team that is made up exclusively of players that play Division III basketball. They're called We Are D3. And so the winner of that regional will play Fail Harder out in Wichita as part of a doubleheader out there in front of the Aftershocks, which is a Wichita State alumni team. But yeah, these teams fund themselves. I mean, they come together every summer. There are dedicated and passionate people behind these teams that organize them, that recruit the players. If it's an alumni team, they're looking for players that all went to the same school. If it's a non-alumni team like Fail Harder is, they're looking to go get the best basketball players that they can find. And so they just come together naturally on their own. They find their funding sources. Sometimes they make money, sometimes they don't. But for them, it's the passion. One of the guys that's organizing the Fail Harder team is Jake Mills, Kyle Guy as well. But Jake Mills has been on site, and I'm watching Jake at courtside, and you can tell he's got a lot invested in this, not just emotionally but financially. And you can see that as he goes crazy on the sidelines. It's an awesome thing to see, the level of passion and intensity and just fandom that even the people organizing these teams have for the game itself.
So moving forward now that we're in the Sweet 16 now, the championship will be played where?
Well, that depends. It really depends on who wins. So if Wichita State continues to win, they'll host all the way through. There's a West Virginia alumni team that's playing in Charleston, and they'll continue to host. But we got to see where these games shake out. If we don't have a host team that advances, then the championship is going to be in Louisville at Bellarmine or Bellarmine.
Okay, now, lastly, and again, we're talking about the TBT that took place last night at Hinkle, and Fail Harder, the team put together by Kyle Guy, is the team that has advanced out of Hinkle. Will this return, Dan Friel, from TBT? Will this event return to Indianapolis next year?
I hope so. I can't say definitively yet where we're going to be because every year we kind of assess everything that we're doing and figure out where we are. But I love Hinkle, and I think, as I told you last night, Hinkle was on our bucket list early on, like before this event even launched, as a place that we want to play these games. It's just such a fantastic facility and such a gift to the city of New Orleans, city of Indianapolis, I should say, that Butler has maintained that facility as well as it has, and they keep it in commerce because it just is an absolutely incredible facility.
Well, I thought it was great. I thought the action was fun. I thought it was exciting. And in addition to that, there was a camaraderie and a respect amongst all the players. You didn't get some of the knuckleheadedness you get sometimes. And fans enjoyed it. Everybody was having a good time and reminiscing and watching good basketball as well. So I wanted to have you on. Thank you for it. And hopefully we'll have it out here again next year. But we'll watch to see what happens for the remainder of this tournament in 25.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it very much. Again, Dan Friel, who is one of the co-founders for the TBT tournament. We'll come back. I will recap for you everything that took place at Colts camp in practice number 1 here as we are underway for training camp. Grand Park in Westfield. We'll hand it off to John as well next. a sign of my maturity, Eddie, as a broadcaster, is the fact that you just played that song and I did not immediately tell you about how I had screwed up the lyrics to that for the vast majority of my life.
Except you just
Aren't
did.
you proud of me? Yes, well, but it wasn't the first thing I mentioned. I rather pointed out the sign of my maturity, right?
Yeah, what's next? Your humility? Is that what we're going with?
Well, I mean, I will say for as sticky and thick as the air is today, I was just looking at a video of my, I can look over and see the shot of myself here at Colts camp and got slightly turned on because this looks good. I'm obviously being facetious. It is a warm one for certain, which is why the Colts probably were done at 11 o'clock this morning. 10 until 11 was practice today. Thank you to Alec Pierce for his time. I got to thinking about this, and, sometimes when you conduct an interview or you talk to somebody, it's after the fact that something hits you, and you're like, man. And I would not have asked him this, obviously. But I think that we automatically assume when a player is entering a free agency year, that player wants to return. And Alec Pierce did kind of mention early in his career just, some of the challenges of different head coaches and then, obviously different quarterbacks as well. When you look at the fact that he is a guy that is entering his fourth year, looks to be in great shape. Last year I thought really made big strides and took a big step. And then you look at the situation with the Colts, you ask yourself, are we certain that he would want to return? Because if you are entering into free agency, and we just saw it with Miles Turner, all of a sudden, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, I had no idea that was going to come out of left field. But is there another team out there that looks at Alec Pierce and says, that guy is the missing piece for our quarterback, and we think he would slot perfectly with what we want to do? And we have a quarterback that has a lot more consistency and a lot more certainty about who and what they are than the situation that is brewing in Indianapolis. And if you are taking passes from Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson, both of which basically split even today 50-50 the starting reps for the Colts at quarterback, but Daniel Jones started the practice sessions with the first unit, but they alternated back and forth. Both had good moments. Both had moments that you'd like back. There was not a clear-cut, definitive leader amongst the two. Both were taking snaps from Bortolini, who I think is very safe to say, if healthy, is going to be their starting center over Danny Pencer. And both of them were throwing to an area where they looked over, they noticed the rookie Wally at the cornerback position that was the draft pick out of Minnesota over Jalen Jones, because he was getting Wally the starting reps at the corner position over Jones and Juju Brents. That really is kind of the overwhelming storyline from today. But if you're Alec Pierce, and yes, you can say, look, it doesn't matter to me, they look the same whether the ball is coming out of the hands of Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. But what if, just hypothetically, what if a Chargers come calling, or a Bengals come calling, or a Texans come calling? Do you say, if you're Alec Pierce, look, at least in those places, I know exactly who's going to be throwing me the ball, and I know exactly where the ball is going to be coming, and it's going to be the same guy over and over and over, and I know the ball is going to be where it needs to be. It's not going to be over my head, and it's not going to be at my feet. I don't know, and I don't think that's the case, but we automatically assume that players that are free agents are going to and want to return. But did we not learn in the last couple of months in this town that sometimes free agency can have surprises of their own? Now, I say that and watch. Tomorrow we'll probably find out that, Alec Pierce is re-signed. But it was a good interview, though, and I appreciated Alec Pierce's time, nearly 20 minutes. That will be available in podcast form on the website. Also, again, reminder, Fever going to be wearing the Stranger Things jerseys, and good conversation about that as well. Adam Alexander joined us, Zach Osterman, Eddie Garrison was back in studio. John is up next, and we'll recap again what happened here in day number 1, practice number 1 for the Colts. We'll be back with you at noon tomorrow, tentatively scheduled right now. Bernard Ryman going to join us, I believe, tomorrow, but we'll see. But some player in some form or fashion will join us tomorrow as well. Stay cool, everybody. Thanks for listening to Query & Company.